Welcome, everyone. Today we're doing a deep dive into, well, a really pivotal Supreme Court ruling. It's all about land claims in India.
That's right.
And this ruling, it's pretty definitive, basically. No claim without proof.
And also, no overstaying on government land. That's a key part, too.
Absolutely. So our mission today is to unpack why this judgment is, well, so significant for landowners, sure, but also for different communities, maybe even the whole idea of secularism in India.
It's a pleasure to explore this. And you're right, this goes way beyond just the legal nuts and bolts.
Oh, yeah.
It touches on cultural practices, how things are administered, even political dynamic. It's fundamentally reshaping how we think about land claims.
That's a really interesting angle. Can you maybe give us a bit more on that? Like, how does it shift the cultural view of religious property, not just the legal ownership?
Well, think about it. By demanding clear documents, proof,
Right.
the court is sort of nudging these practices towards more legal formality, less reliance on just historical say-so.
So, moving away from just faith-based precedent.
In a way, yes. It potentially reduces conflict by aligning religious claims with clear state law, and that itself supports a secular approach, where the law applies equally,
Okay, that makes sense. It sets the stage nicely. So let's back up a bit. What was the actual problem here? What triggered this whole thing? What were Waqf Boards doing?
Well, it's complex. Basically, you had numerous Waqf Boards across the country making claims on all sorts of land.
Like what kind of land?
Oh, everything. Abandoned temples, government property, ancient shrines, you name it. And often, these claims didn't have strong formal paperwork.
Okay.
Instead, they often relied on this idea called waqf by user.
Waqf by user. Let's define that. That means claiming property just because it's been used for religious purposes for a long time, right? Even without a formal deed.
Exactly. Usage implies ownership, essentially. And we saw this play out in some pretty high-profile cases.
Such as?
Well, there was the Sikh Gurudwara in Shadara, Delhi. That was a big one. And the Jindal mine lease case out in Rajasthan. In those situations, the claims were often based on that kind of informal usage, or maybe surveys, not necessarily a clear legal dedication.
So the court's response now is crystal clear. No proof, no claim, like literally demanding proof, a deed, a title, rejecting claims based on just assumption or old usage.
Precisely. It forces a sort of reckoning, between maybe long-standing practice and strict legal proof.
Yeah, that feels like a major shift.
It really is.
Okay, let's dig into those cases then. They seem crucial. Tell us about the Delhi Gurudwara in Shadara. What was the claim and why was the court's decision so, well, emphatic?
So in Shadara, the Waqf Board claimed this Sikh Gurudwara was Waqf property.
Right.
But the court looked and found, well, no evidence of any formal dedication. They pointed out, look, this place has been a functioning Gurudwara since 1947.
So decades of established use.
Exactly. And the court's statement was really powerful. They actually said, there is a Gurudwara, let it be.
Wow, let it be. That's quite direct.
It cuts right through, doesn't it? It basically says, established functioning places of worship, if there's no solid proof they were dedicated as Waqf, should just remain as they are. Don't disrupt things.
That phrase, let it be, it almost sounds like a judicial philosophy statement. What does that signal about the court's overall approach here?
I think it signals a desire for legal certainty, stability.
Yeah.
Favoring the current undisputed reality over trying to unwind history with weak claims, especially claims that could really upset a community.
Makes sense. Okay, and the other case, Rajasthan Waqf Board versus Jindal Saw.
Similar theme, different context.
Yeah.
The Waqf Board claimed land leased for mining.
On what basis?
On the basis of an old platform found there. But again, no concrete proof of dedication.
And court
Dismissed it. The records clearly show the land had no religious status, no prior dedication. It really hammered home that just pointing to some old structure isn't enough. You need verifiable evidence.
Got it. And it wasn't just private land. You mentioned the government stepping in.
Yes, the central government made a very firm statement to the Supreme Court. Essentially, government land is government land.
Right.
Nobody can claim it as Waqf, not even using that by user argument. State property is basically off limits for such claims.
That's a critical boundary being drawn.
Absolutely. And what's really interesting is how the court then laid out the legal principles behind all these decisions.
Okay, let's talk about those foundational principles then. What was the core legal reasoning that connects these cases?
Well, there are a few key takeaways. First, and this is huge, just using a property isn't enough anymore.
Okay.
You need literal proof of dedication for it to be Waqf. That's now a strict requirement. So Waqf by user on its own doesn't really cut it.
That is a major pivot. What about timing? Do claims expire?
Yes, that's the second point. The Limitation Act applies, specifically the 12-year rule, meaning you generally have 12 years from when the issue arises to bring a legal claim. If you wait longer, you might be barred. This stops disputes from lingering forever. It was relevant in that Delhi Gurudwara case.
Keeps things moving. Okay, and there was another legal term you mentioned earlier, res judicata. Can you break that down for us?
Sure. Res judicata is a principle that means a matter already judged.
Okay.
So if a land dispute was already fully settled by a regular civil court before 1995, the Waqf tribunals can't just reopen that same case.
So it brings finality.
Yeah.
Prevents relitigating old issues.
Exactly. It respects prior court decisions and ensures legal certainty. And tying back to the government land point, this whole framework reinforces that even using state property for religious purposes for a long time doesn't magically turn it into Waqf property.
Got it. Government land stays government land.
Precisely.
Now, this ruling didn't just appear out of nowhere. There's context, right? Like recent challenges, proposed changes. Talk about the 2025 Waqf Amendment Act. What's the government trying to do?
Right. So the center has been pushing for reforms. Things like digitizing records, increasing transparency, modernization efforts.
Simple goals.
Yes. But controversially, they also proposed maybe abolishing the Waqf by user concept entirely, unless there's formal registration.
Whoa, abolish it completely. That sounds drastic.
It is, and that's where it gets complicated. Because you have petitioners pushing back.
What are their concerns?
They argue that getting rid of Waqf by user might undermine genuinely established Waqf rights, especially for properties considered Waqf for maybe generations, based on that very principle, but lacking, centuries-old paperwork.
So a real tension between modernizing the system and potentially erasing historical rights based on custom.
Exactly. And interestingly, the Supreme Court itself, specifically a bench led by Chief Justice Khanna, has actually flagged some worries about these proposed amendments.
Oh, what concerns did the court raise?
Well, they seem cautious about unintended consequences, like could completely ditching Waqf by user harm legitimate historic religious practices that just don't have the formal deeds from way back when?
A valid point.
They also raise questions about potentially including non-Muslims on Waqf boards. What are the implications there? And they worried about maybe losing judicial oversight if these tribunals get too much power without enough checks.
So the court is basically saying, hold on, let's reform carefully.
That seems to be the message. Reform, yes, but don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Be mindful of the complexities.
Okay, so pulling all this together, what's the actual on-the-ground impact of this big Supreme Court ruling? For landowners, it sounds like good news, more security.
Absolutely. For private landowners, this is a big relief. It means much clearer rights, less vulnerability to claims popping up based just on history without proof. It should reduce disputes.
And what about religious communities themselves? What's the message for them?
The message is loud and clear. Get your records in order.
Documentation, documentation, documentation.
Exactly. Maintain accurate, accessible records. If you want to substantiate a claim or even just secure your existing property, you need the paperwork. It's not just good practice now, it's legally essential.
Which puts the onus on the Waqf boards too, right? They need to step up.
Definitely. They have a clear mandate now. They need to embrace digitization, be transparent, manage their assets properly. It's about accountability.
Bringing things into the modern era, essentially.
Yes, and ensuring their operations are clear and publicly verifiable.
And through all this, the role of the courts seems really reinforced, like they're the gatekeepers now.
Yes, I think that's a good way to put it. The courts are providing the crucial checks, making sure faith-based claims align with established legal procedures.
So it's about coexistence, but within the legal framework?
Precisely. The overall message is accountability, clarity. Faith practices and legal rules have to work together seamlessly. It pushes away from ambiguity towards evidence.
All right, this is super helpful. Now let's get practical for our listeners. If you're listening to this, what are the key takeaways you should remember or apply?
Okay, first thing. Always check the class of property you're dealing with. Is it state land? What? Private, religious. Knowing this upfront is fundamental.
Understand the category. Got it. What else?
Documentation is king. Always ask for the paperwork. Deeds, gazette notifications, records of use, whatever exists, don't just take someone's word for it.
We've heard that loud and clear. Proof matters.
And remember what we said about res judicata. Civil court verdicts stick. If a court already settled a land dispute before 95, a Waqf board can't just bring it up again. that decision is final.
Okay, prior rulings hold weight. That's important.
And finally, with all this talk of digitization,
Yeah.
keep your own records updated, especially if you're interacting with the new digital Waqf portal. Staying current with official documentation is going to be increasingly vital.
Good advice. Be proactive with your paperwork.
Absolutely. This whole deep dive, it really shows this intersection of law, faith, property rights.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, the ruling brings clarity, security for owners,
Yeah.
but it's also a major wake-up call for religious boards. The bottom line from the law is now stark. Evidence matters.
Evidence, not just faith alone.
Ex-
So this leaves us with a final thought for you, the listener, to maybe chew on. In our society, which is changing so fast,